we have to trust that little voice that's inside of us, that little voice. And I'm not talking about somebody who's hearing voices, somebody who is psychotic, but I think we all know, we all have that feeling, that sense when something is off. And then, of course, the question becomes, so what are we going to do about it? How are we going to handle a situation that just doesn't feel right? Are we going to deny? Are we going to avoid? Are we going to repress? Are we going to suppress? Are we going to, pretend that everything is really okay when it's not? Or are you going to say to yourself, as uncomfortable as you may feel, that there is a necessary conversation or conversations that you need to have with some people where the relationships are just not working for you. And this is why the art of emotional communication and problem solving is so important. Other things that I want you to check in with yourself, things like your physical health. I mean, we know all the time about the importance of sleep and diet and exercise, and it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to really put all of these things into action. And you're important, and it's important. And it's really important, to make sure that you are, in fact, really taking care of yourself physically. And of course, that is what self-care, is really all about. And I think it really is, it's a question of just being honest with yourself and being able to assess when things are going well and when things are not going well. And if you find that you are off track, maybe you need to write things down and say, look, it's my mood, it's my lack of physical, exercise, or it's my relationships, and then trying to figure out a plan, what you are going and what you can do to tackle the things that are not working for you. And you've heard me say this all the time, the importance of trying to really live our life authentically and to live our life in ways that are really, really in our best interests. Well, this morning there was a 3-page article in the New York Times, and I'm going to just read you a couple of paragraphs, and then I'm going to introduce my guest, my husband Jim Bredos, who is a sociologist and who is the host of an amazing show on M&N, the Radical Imagination. And this is about this story in the New York Times is about a show that I actually happen to watch and love on Netflix. And if you haven't watched this show, I definitely recommend it. The show is It Ends With Us. So last summer, as the release of It Ends With Us approached, Justin Baldoni, he was a director and also one of the stars of the film, and Jamie Heath, the lead producer, they hired a crisis public relationship expert. Now, why did they do this? Well, during the shooting, Blake Lively, and we all know Blake Lively, she's a wonderful actress, the co-star, she had complained that the men had repeatedly, the producer, her co-star, had repeatedly violated physical boundaries and made sexual and other inappropriate comments to her. So their studio, initially, they heard her. The studio is Wayfarer. They agreed to provide a full-time intimacy coordinator, bringing in an outside producer, good idea, and put other safeguards on the set. And in a side letter to Miss Lively's contract signed by Mr. Heath, the studio, they also agreed not to retaliate against the actress. So here we have a situation. She felt that there were a lot of things going on where she felt uncomfortable. There were some sexual inappropriate comments and behaviors. So the studio, at least initially, they responded appropriately. But then what happened here? Well, the studio, apparently, they were a little concerned that all of this was going to get out into the public. So what did they do? They hired some hotshot PR people. In fact, one of the women, and very depressing when I hear that another woman is really trying to bury another woman who had the courage to come out to talk about sexual harassment, period. So they hired this woman. Her last name is Nathan. And the game became a game. And this is a quote: "We can bury anyone. A smear machine in Hollywood efforts to strike back at Lively after she accused the director of It Ends With Us of misconduct." So why I want my husband, sociologist Jim Redos, to weigh in all of this? Because I wanted to talk about doing the right thing and yet having to deal with possible retaliation. And we see this over and over and over again. You know, we encourage people to speak up, and yet there's always the possibility of major retaliation, which could mean a loss of a job. In the case of Blake Lively, the actress, I mean, there were problems as a result of the retaliatory behavior that affected her business and her reputation. And then people online, they started to really, weigh in on something that they, of course, really knew nothing about, causing Blake Lively a lot of emotional and psychological and financial damage. So Jim,
Yes.
we speak up. We speak up. We
start?
We want to do the right thing, and yet we're having to oftentimes deal with not only the possibility but the reality of retaliation.
Let's walk this a couple of steps back.
Okay.
This has been, look, Hollywood and its culture is well known for decades. This is nothing new. This has been going on since the beginnings of the moguls who ran the place, and still continues. There, we could spend 2 or 3 full-time Ask Beatty shows about the affairs, the marriages that came about as a result of the interactions that went on with stars at various movies. It's well known. This is fodder for our gossip mills and so on. At the same time, I think we're in a period where there's some reflection on achieving a truer and more just balance that I think the Me Too movement lost sight of for a while.
Why do you say that?
Well, because I think there
And
were.
how do you feel that the Me Too movement
Well, I
lost
think there were.
momentum?
I mean, we women like Catherine Deneuve and others, actresses and others, have remarked recently that we've been somewhat puritanical about some of this, that not all what you may see or read about qualifies for sexual abuse. Now, don't get me wrong. Yeah, absolutely. There's got to be a criteria. There's got to be justice on this. And I'm not saying in any stretch of imagination that this doesn't happen. This case that you're talking about certainly seems
It happens a lot.
right. But what I'm saying is that some of it, I don't know how much of it, is consensual. And some of it is also, by the way, publicity that the studios create themselves and that the actors and actresses create. Now, I'm not saying that's the overwhelming majority. You raise an issue, though, of speaking out, and this goes, and then realizing we teach our kids to do that, to be honest and speak out and speak the truth as you know it and hear it and so on. Um, and yet we are not prepared for the possible retaliation, as you put it.
But let me just go back to something, that you said, about maybe some people are in quotes puritanical. The fact is that what I might feel is sexual harassment may not be what somebody else feels
Exactly.
is sexual harassment.
Exactly.
But my feelings about feeling sexually harassed happen to be important,
Absolutely.
even though they may be different than woman A, B, or C. So that
Yeah.
if I'm coming to a boss, or if I'm on a set, on a movie set, and I'm saying to a director that I don't like the way this person is behaving, or I don't like the way this person is touching me, or I don't
Right.
like the fact in this particular situation that these
They did
men,
the right thing.
that
They
they would,
brought in somebody that would be a counselor or work with them on this.
right, but
That sounds okay to me.
right.
Right.
But then because they were so concerned that this whole issue was going to become public, which of course it really has become public, that they decided
They
to
did wrong.
smear Blake
I
Lively.
think what I was trying to get across there is we've got to have, understandably, the anger and frustration came out, and it manifests itself primarily, not primarily, but and not exclusively, but through the Me Too movement, and it was justified. But I think that there were excesses, and I think what we're trying to do is figure out, well, absolutely, one's feelings are absolutely important on this, but where do we when does it become a lawsuit? When does it become something that qualifies objectively as
But
far as
this
we can
isn't
make it?
objectively. This is
No, I
subjectively.
understand.
If somebody,
In this
if
case,
but you
yes.
see, if somebody touches me in a way that I find objectionable,
You mentioned it to them, right?
well, you mention it to them, and then you may
Right.
mention it to your boss. Now, the same person, another person, may find that this is not objectionable, that this
Right.
is really okay.
So,
But the person
yeah.
who feels that someone has crossed over a certain line, it is a subjective feeling that
Well,
has to be taken very seriously.
no, I'm not saying it shouldn't be. We're talking now, this case is becoming quite a legal brouhaha.
Yes,
So,
and rightly so.
rightfully so.
And rightly so.
So, but we had situations with Al Franken and goofing around and stuff, and then having to leave his Senate seat and so on. I mean, this was an excess. There are all kinds of,
Why would you say it was an excess?
well, I don't think he should have lost his Senate seat for what he did.
But you don't know exactly what he did. This woman alleged certain behaviors that she found reprehensible,
Look,
and
what
so
I'm
he
saying
lost
is
his
there's got to
seat.
be absolutely, there's got to be some criteria, some framework, some parameters here,
There can
which
be.
will vary.
There can be parameters and criteria. If I
Well, it's got to be
feel,
legal ones. If you're going to bring a legal case, there's got to be some sort of criteria for a justifiable lawsuit, right?
but it is subjective. If somebody touches,
Not when it gets to the law, then it becomes a public, in the public space that gets to be debated, and there are laws and precedents and so on that the judge, a jury needs to follow.
but for example, a man touches a woman's breast. Woman A may think, oh well, he just
You're
did
talking
it.
about
It
now
was
within a movie scene?
within a work scene, within any scene, within a movies, on a movie set,
Well,
in a work situation. So as I said, woman A may think nothing of it and think it was sort of cute and may,
Well, we gotta understand
not.
the social context under which this is happening. I mean, maybe, you know, you just, some guy comes up to in the coffee machine, just begins to randomly fondle, the woman there, that, you know, if it's done within a certain flirting thing and he gets an okay from her, or I don't know, you have to
But
look at the
that's,
social context.
but what you just said
Yeah.
is what's important.
Yeah,
Is
her
it,
okay.
is it her okay, his okay? Is it consensual?
Yeah,
Are we agreeing to flirt?
absolutely.
Are we agreeing to
Yeah,
touch each other? Okay, are we agreeing? Is there an agreement?
that has to be made clear.
And with this
For the male too.
situation, with Blake Lively, apparently there was no agreement.
Sounds
And
like
she
it.
did exactly the right thing in the beginning.
I said that.
And the
I agree.
studio did exactly the right thing. But then, because they were so concerned that this was going to get out, so here we have 3 pages
That's
in the New York
the
Times.
interesting question
Right.
you're addressing.
Right.
Okay, now let's get on to that. That within this very polarized cultural world, political world that we live in,
Right.
speaking out, whether you're a journalist, whether you're an academic, whether you're an actress, whether you're a sports figure, and so on,
Right.
has to be looked at within a social context and judged within some sort of objective criteria, and realize that there are people that are going to, not all, but people who are in power are going to fight back, and they're going to think they can stymie that criticism. And when you get it from the very top, and you know, a president who has been able to do that his whole life, well, you know, a lot of people who are his allies and who believe in him learn a lesson.
But the director in this particular
Definitely
situation,
wrong.
and yes, and her co-star, they made it very clear. I mean, the New York Times, they were able to get all the transcripts, so there were over 1,000 pages of transcript. And here we have it. We can bury anyone, a smear machine in Hollywood, and so it was. And this Miss Nathan, interesting again, a woman who is not
It's a lawyer, right? That's
a PR person. And she was the one who represented Johnny Depp and a number of other actors. I don't think she's a lawyer. I think that she is a PR person, as far as I was able to reach. Yes, she was definitely trying to
and
do
that's
her
the
job.
question, Beatty. When you're doing your job and you see something that you feel is wrong, who can you turn to? Where do you go? And I think you're absolutely right that it becomes more and more difficult these days.
Yes.
Because people are not that interested. People are scared.
Right. And for good reason.
Well, yeah.
Look at what Donald Trump said that he is going to do, what he is planning to do with people who have not supported him.
And that's why you have to hold people accountable. Instead, you have loads of people sucking up to him.
Exactly.
Because they mayor.
Right, because they do not want to deal with the wrath of Donald Trump, to lose their jobs, and they don't want to deal with his power and with his possible retaliation. And I get it.
They have no real center of morality.
That's true.
Or what is decent. They may, now here's, okay, you can go on and on and on. And
so when do we
what's interesting is how can we, again, as an academic here, how can we bring this discussion, this sense of ethics, and when you do the right thing and pay the consequences, could be an act of civil disobedience and so on and so on. How can we get our young people to to be exposed to that sort of discussion, because I think they really crave it. They're not getting it at home.
Right,
They're seeing,
right,
I mean, your statistics are showing, right? I mean, the divorce rates are up,
right, right.
extramarital affairs are, so people are getting away with all kinds of stuff, and they see it, and the young people see it as well. This is just business as usual, and so on and
Well,
so.
we don't have conversations, you know,
No,
in this particular case, you know, as we're talking, Jim, this is what I'm thinking, you know, as I try to sort of think about what to do, what could have been done. I think that had the studio, they did the right thing initially. They brought in somebody, they brought in a couple people to make sure that, you know, the actress was going to feel safe. Had they been really concerned
right.
about
They just continued doing what they were doing,
no, I think that, well,
the right thing, and why didn't they?
but well, they were concerned that she was going to, or that what was going on the set was going to come out. So I think, wouldn't it have made sense if there was a document that had been presented to her and to the studio with the understanding that
Yeah.
this is being
Admitting a certain
resolved,
guilt, and we are sorry, and we want to make
and
things whole for you.
we've made things whole, and that the other part would be is that you would not go and
Yeah,
talk to
some sort of fair document.
talk to the press or the media about what was an inside matter.
That's a great, great question.
That could have been.
Why didn't they do that?
I don't
They
know.
evidently thought that going that route, that much more decent route, was still too scary, or I don't know, try to put your head, where are these guys' heads are at?
Because that was the thing. They
Yeah.
were worried. Okay,
Well,
they did the right thing by bringing in this consultant who was going to oversee what went on the set. Okay.
exactly.
So I wonder why nobody thought about having Blake Lively sign a document saying we're doing everything that we're doing with the understanding that you're not going to go public with this.
Agreed.
I mean,
It may have
could have
been
resolved
thought about,
everything.
it may have been thought about, and then there was somebody else who just didn't want to do that.
Who wanted to destroy her. It wasn't a question of not wanting to do it. They chose to strike back at her and with the potential of destroying her career.
Well, as a threat to her coming out.
That's right.
Okay.
I mean, the documents are signed all the time where people agree that this is not going to be something that's going to be reported to the media or anybody else.
Well,
confidential documents are
I
signed.
think what you're seeing
And you go
also,
on.
what you're seeing also in another world too, part of our country, there's been a desire to clamp down on protesters, on demonstrators, make sure it doesn't get out of hand, make sure that they really were not heard. And I'm not saying that they have all the answers or everything is correct, that we're saying. So
It could have been done nicely. It could have been done nicely, I think.
well, in that case, yes, of course it could. But I guess again, the ruthlessness
The ruthlessness, yes.
of our culture at this point leads so many in power to either suck up, to either just compromise, not really care, out of greed, out of power, out of whatever necessity they feel they must follow. This isn't happening.
You see, there's a desire, it seems, and I so wonder what, listeners are thinking, right now to our conversation. There is such a desire for a win-lose kind of mentality that the desire to bring, how can we, with opposing views and opposing beliefs, how can we come together without destroying each other? I think that's really the issue.
See, I would differ with you a little bit on that. I think that most people, given the chance, would very much like to live in this sort of world.
I think they say that they would.
I think they would.
say
I
that
think
they
they
would.
feel, they see over and over and over and over and over again the hypocrisy that those in power, whether it's the media, whether it's other politicians, and so on, that they don't, they become so cynical that they either tune out or they come to just say, okay, this is the way things are, and there's no way else but that. And I think what
Well,
we
that's
need
the
is,
win-lose. That's the win-lose
well, I think what we
mentality.
need is a strong leadership, a vision. I'm not talking about, simplistic sort of morality here, but life is messy, and we need to have ways to try to maneuver and try to work in that messy world.
You see, what happened here in this particular story, with Blake Lively, is that the studio, the producer, her co-star, instead of trying to find a way to really work things out and move forward, because they initially did the right things,
Right.
their agenda was to smear her and destroy her.
You know what would
That
make a
was what happened.
difference? If something really, really happened to them. Just like
Well, here's a story, 3 pages in
no,
the
no,
New
no,
York
no. I know
Times.
that there is some
it's-
legal consequences to this,
Yes.
than even jail time. What happened in France just recently with the woman that was raped dozens of times.
Yes.
They are now serving, I think the husband, the ex-husband or whatever he is,
Right.
serving 20 years.
Right.
And the others are 6 to 10 years. This means something. It's a
Right.
very important case. This
Yes.
is what would happen.
It's going to be
If you're
interesting
going to
to
be
see
so
what happens.
blatant about this,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
Now, whether you have a judge that has the integrity and courage to stand up remains to be seen, because there's going to be a lot of people behind the scenes that are
Right.
going to try to maneuver and all
Right.
kinds of threats and promises and this and that, and it won't be maybe as blatant, but
Well, listen to this though. What she has said is that, the complaint, of course, alleges sexual harassment and retaliation. So usually, if women have the
absolutely
have the chutzpah,
right.
which is so hard to come out and allege sexual harassment or sexual abuse. So in her complaint, it's both the sexual harassment and the retaliation that she filed with the California Civil Rights Department.
Great.
In a precursor to
that makes it
lawsuit.
even worse.
Absolutely.
That really raises the
Yes,
bar.
and this is what she says. In a statement, she says, I hope that my legal action helps pull back the curtain on these sinister retaliatory tactics to harm people who speak up about misconduct and helps protect others who may be targeted. So it was not just, in this situation, it was not just the sexual harassment and the misconduct, but it was that they went so far as to try to smear her and destroy her reputation. And apparently on social media, they did a pretty good job. There were millions of people who responded in a way that was not
so who's the hero on this? Who brought this up? Now the media got the attention. Who did she turn to that was able to get now this story out there?
Well, that, something I sort of skimmed this whole story here, because the front page says,
that's the person who stood up and found, the way
she must
into
have.
the media.
She must have, because here you have actually 3 reporters from the New York Times.
There you go.
I mean, it's rare that there's going to be a 3-page story, front page story in the New York Times about this. So obviously she is the one, after they did everything possible to smear and try and destroy her.
Is now put themselves
and well, they put themselves on the line, and
at least to report this,
and they're doing exactly the right thing. But as we were talking last week, Jim, and I was just looking for the article here about, how we all talk about wanting justice, and yet how many people are willing to do what needs to be done?
Pay a price.
You pay a price, and this is something.
Prepare and realize that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, and you sort of weigh the pros and cons. I mean, you pay a price if there's something going on at work, and you need the paycheck.
Yeah, you don't want to act in a suicidal way here. I mean, not literally.
Exactly.
You gotta survive.
You have to survive, and what do? Do you speak up?
Pick your fights.
Well, pick the people ideally who you're going to interact with, personally and professionally. And yet the consequences, can be potentially really dire for people. You lose your job. You can't feed your kids. You can't pay your rent.
Absolutely. And the
And
system depends on
yes,
that
yes.
to happen because that's fear enough to keep people in line from shutting their mouths.
That's
Most people.
that's exactly true. And this is where, you talk about, the people who are in power, whether we like it to admit it or not, who really are able to control in many ways the agenda.
But listen, listen, listen.
Yes,
We're 3 days what from Hanukkah and Christmas.
yes, we are.
And so let's leave it. Well, look, we're
Yes,
we're
you're right.
I'm more secular. I'm a secular Jew. You're more of a practicing one. But here our
You're right.
rabbi, he was an Orthodox rabbi, Jesus Christ,
Yes.
paid the consequences.
Well,
He took it upon himself.
I can't
did.
believe you're bringing that up,
Well,
but you're
no,
right. You're
well,
right.
and
You're absolutely right.
the Christian prophetic tradition comes from that. And people like, again, Reverend Barber tries to, people still need to dig down and realize that love and transcendent love and state and civil disobedience even will overcome, right? We shall overcome.
Well, we hope we have to
Well,
continue
that's the
to
route to
try.
go.
No, I loved your trajectory here because I think it's important
Well,
that
I did want to make
you
it
that
a Merry Christmas in some
right
way.
that Christmas is Wednesday and Hanukkah, the
That's
first night of
right.
Hanukkah is also Wednesday night. And as I was starting the show, hopefully people are going to be able to celebrate with loved ones. And
And remember the least among us.
exactly.
Because that's what the
Exactly.
Hebrew prophets talked about.
Yes.
And that's what Jesus talked about.
Yes. And for people,
And
as I
Muhammad,
mentioned,
all the great
who
leaders.
don't have families and who may be estranged or divorced and who may be at loose ends. I mean, I've always found that volunteering, it gives me so much more probably than the people that I am giving to. So that's always something that we can think about. Well, not just during the holidays, but during the 365, days as well. And by the way, I just want to say, because this was something that I wrote in my, SB column recently, that if you want to forget about the holidays and you don't want to think about it at all, I mean, that is obviously a choice, and you could just luxuriate, on your own and take a walk. And maybe if you have a dog, take a walk with your dog, and that there are no right or wrong ways, when it comes to how are we going to celebrate
Well, I'll
the
celebrate with you.
holidays.
I'm forgetting a good part of it, if that's okay. Although we may go to see Umbrellas of Cherbourg, which I think is a wonderful, romantic,
Well,
loving
that
thing to
would
go
be
see on
good.
Christmas Day
Well, we're
and
fortunate.
Hanukkah. Okay.
We are definitely one of the fortunate ones. Well, listen, it is 3:56 here in extraordinarily cold New York City. And for a Canadian girl who grew up when it was 30 and 40 degrees below zero in Winnipeg, I can't believe that I complain about this, but I do. So I want to leave all of you with my two weekly messages. Of course, the first, holidays and 365 days of uh, 65 days of the year, degrees, exactly. I hope that you are doing everything possible to be living your life in ways that are in your best interest across the board, eliminating destructive and self-destructive behaviors in people. And secondly, of course, we all need to do a much, 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 much better job in learning to accept each other and ideally to love each other.
And live
So
your life as you truly want to, with a certain integrity. I think that's
absolutely, it makes
in all the days will take care of himself.
well, it makes
You'll have a
for
peace that
it makes for a better life for ourselves, and it also makes for a much, much, much better world. And I really want to thank my producers at the Progressive Radio Network. You make my life every single week really much, much, much easier. than I could ever imagine. And I also want to wish Dr. Gary Null happy holidays in very beautiful Naples, where the temperature is probably in the 70s right now as we speak. So,
Feeding his animals and cutting down
well,
trees with
that's a good
shrubs,
thing.
taking care.
That's a good thing. So, again, have a very happy holiday, everybody. And I will talk with you next week and every Monday from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Ask Beatty Show right here on the Progressive Radio Network. So be good to yourself. Let's be good to others and have a good rest of the day. Bye bye, everybody.